and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 412, and today's date is July 10th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Terrorists Will Use Car Bombs, Chemical Weapons, and Dirty Nukes. False flag is now ramping up. Before I get started, I just want to make a couple announcements here. Yesterday, I did a story on 1 in 3 people have an RFID chip. It turns out that story was completely false. It was a hoax. The Wyoming Institute of Technology really doesn't exist, so that website is a complete fake. And I want to thank all those people who've been emailing into me who reported this. Thank you. This entire thing is false. It is a hoax. I placed a correction on the report on the X22Report.com site. I also did it on YouTube right in the description of the video. It's right on top so people can see it, and I just wanted to mention it here. I also wanted to welcome all those new subscribers who are subscribing to YouTube. If you haven't visited the X22Report.com site, you can come over and take a look. We have many different tabs. I talk about the economic collapse. It's an overview. I have to really update that because there have been so many other things going on that I have to add to the timeline. We have the forum, which is the people. It is completely free. Anybody can join up. All you need is your email and a handle that you want to use. And if you're a little hesitant about joining, you can still read all the posts. And again, it's completely free. There's just people on there talking about the economic collapse and all other different issues. And everyone just gets together and talks about all different things. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we can see right now that the ISIS, the Islamic State, the ISIL terrorist group is really ramping up in the Middle East, and the corporate media, the U.S. government, they are really pushing the propaganda out there. They really want us to know that this terrorist group is very dangerous. And of course, they've been telling us it's much, much worse than Al-Qaeda. And we know from the past that they said they're going to use car bombs in embassies if the United States should attack. They're also captured a chemical weapons plant, and now they have nuclear material. So you can see what's happening. They're continually pushing out the propaganda that they have weapons of mass destruction. Now, of course, they're using all this to push the agenda of this next event, and they need to build the story as we go along, and this is exactly what they're doing. Let's get into what's going on here in the economy, and we see that the initial the jobless claims have fallen again, but the continuing claims have risen. And we all know that this is a complete manipulated number. The job numbers are completely manipulated, and I have to say, thanks to X Wired on the People, which is the forum on the X22Report.com site, he explains it very, very nicely of how another section of the unemployment is calculated. I'm going to use what he wrote on the forum. You can take a look at that. In the U.S., in order to file for unemployment and be counted, you must have the following. According to the Department of Labor, you need to meet 2 criteria to qualify for unemployment. You are unemployed through no fault of your own. That means you are out of a job due to layoffs. If you quit your job or fired for gross misconduct, you're not eligible. You meet your state's requirements for time worked or wages earned. Every state has different rules. For example, New York State requires you to have worked in at least 2 calendar quarters of your base period. Generally, that just means the year before be paid at least $1,600 in wages in one of those quarters, and during that period made a total of at least 1.5 times the amount you made in your highest paid quarter that year. If you have a solid long-term job that you lost, you probably meet your state's minimum time and wage requirements. Part-time workers are not meeting this. Therefore, people do not qualify for unemployment and thus are not counted as unemployed because they were never technically employed in the first place. Here's some examples. In New Jersey, you need to make about $365 a week for 20 weeks in order to qualify. Now, if we look at this, it's $365 a week divided by 30 hours, let's say. You're making about $12.17 an hour. And if we look at some of the jobs around in New Jersey. We see CVS, they pay about $10.31. ShopRite, $10.73. Home Depot, $12.21. Macy's, $12.20. Walmart, $9.90. Rite Aid, $11.20, and Sears, $9.25. So you can see it is very difficult to hit this mark to get unemployment, because you're going to have to do this for 20 weeks in order to qualify, and most people don't work 30 hours a week. They keep them under that, and you can see these people are not counted. Now you have to remember, the full-time job people now are taking on part-time jobs, and if they get removed or laid off, because we know a lot of retail stores are closing, they don't even qualify. So all these people are not showing up on the unemployment statistics. We also know those people who have not been on an interview for 4 weeks are also not counted. And of course, those people who've just continually send out their resumes and haven't been on an interview for 6 months to a year, they're just considered, they don't need work, they got enough money, they don't need a job or whatsoever. But here we see from the beginning of this year there were a lot of layoffs, and they're continuing. And of course we can see that Sony, Dell, Barclays, RBS, IBM laying off thousands upon thousands of people. Fidelity now is laying off 500 people in the mail office. Lloyd's International laying off another 500. General Cable Corp, 1,000 globally. ASDA International, 1,360 middle managers. So this is continuing. It has not let up. Now, these people will get unemployment. Now, of course, if they haven't been on an interview for 4 weeks, guess what? They're going to fall off unemployment insurance. They didn't get an interview, so they're no longer looking. If they get a part-time job in a retail store and that retail store folds and they're not working more than 30 hours, guess what? They're not going to get unemployment. So we can see how this is all used, and a lot of this information coming out is not holding water anymore. We can see the economy is not doing what the United States government and the Fed are telling us. We can see things are really starting to plummet. Now, we know the real estate market is not doing well. I mean, yes, we see these little bump ups of mortgage applications improved by 1.4%, but they've dropped like 66%. So is that really an improvement? No, not really. And again, this is the hot season for real estate. We should be seeing mortgage applications, the percentage skyrocketing at this point, because we should see every American out there during the summer months putting their houses up for sale. We should be seeing people buy it, but we're not seeing this. We're seeing hedge funds, investment companies purchasing homes in cash. We're also seeing China. They are purchasing homes in cash. And the National Association of Realtors confirmed this, that yes, about $22 billion in home sales are coming from the Chinese, and they are pushing this. And again, this is not everyday Americans who are going to buy these homes. It's investment companies, hedge funds, foreign investors, all paying in cash. The Americans are on the sideline because they cannot afford to purchase these homes. Remember, back in 2008, 38% of the people lost their wealth. A lot of people had foreclosures. This is why you see trillions of dollars on the Fed's books, because they've taken the real estate from the banks and brought it over to their books. And these are all these foreclosures, the toxic real estate. And you can see that the American people right now, with unemployment being around 30 to 37%, they really don't have that discretionary fund, disposable income to save the money. They don't have the credit to purchase these houses. And we are not seeing any type of an improvement in the housing market. Actually, we're seeing prices starting to decline right now. And housing economist warns that the U.S. home prices slowdown is here to stay. And this is coming from Paul Diggle at Capital Economics. This slowdown in home growth seems to be here to stay. Now, why is the prices coming down? Well, they give these ridiculous reasons. The primary reason that the house price gains are set to slow further is the loosening in housing supply conditions. The U.S. housing market has been dealing with tight supply, with a key issue being housing obsolescence. Properties that are no longer desirable because their characteristics do not match what buyers are looking for in their homes. And we can also see that other financial companies are putting out that people are getting confused because there are too many houses on the market. They don't know which one to pick, and this is why they are not purchasing homes at this time either. So we can see all of this is to make us feel like the housing market's still hanging on there, but what's really happening is the bubble is starting to come down on the other side and getting ready to pop. They can't keep this going much longer, and the people of America are stepping back. They don't have the money. Everything's starting to slow up, and once we come out of this spring, summer, hot season for real estate, we're going to see the real estate market really implode on itself. We saw this happen back in 2008, where they came out and they said everything was fine, housing was slowing a little bit, and then what happened during the last part of 2008 into 2009, and pretty much ever since that point in time, housing imploded, but this time it's going to be much, much worse. Okay, now we understand that retail stores and retail companies are starting to come out and say, you know what, it really isn't the weather. We said it was the weather back in the winter time because that's what everybody was saying, but we're starting to realize it really isn't. The Container Stores out there saying that, Walmart's out there saying that, and now lumber liquidators, they've come out with some information saying that the demand strengthened that we saw in March coming out of the winter completely stalled. It slowed, and they see nothing happening during the summer months. And this just goes to show you there's no lumber sales. There's no home improvements really going on. Yes, they're going on, but they've slowed dramatically. They're not seeing what they normally see during the spring, summer months. So the winter had nothing to do with this whatsoever. Now, in the wholesale market, we see U.S. wholesale stockpiles rose in May at the weakest pace in 5 months as companies kept their supplies in line with slower sales. Yes, slower sales. And that's continuing. We're in July already, and they're still talking about slower sales. The slower pace of sales and restocking suggests that consumers and business demand weakened a bit in May, but the figure also shows that companies aren't building up their large stockpiles as of right now because they're realizing with the slower sales, they don't need to continually bring on more and more stuff into their warehouses because no one's buying it, and they don't want to be left with all this stuff. So we can see sales are really starting to slow right now, and we can see that the second quarter GDP is, the hopes are starting to fade away at this point, and it's not looking good. I mean, all financial institutions are starting to revise their outlooks. They were like 4%, 3%. Now they're down to 1.4%, maybe 1%. We're going to see the negative numbers, but of course, the United States government, the central bankers will try to manipulate this, massage this the best they can, just to try to eke that positive number out, and we'll see if that's exactly what they do, but we know what's going to happen after that. They're going to revise, revise, revise. Now, Russia is pushing the BRICS to form an energy association. Russia is to urge its BRICS counterparts to set up an energy association that will include fuel reserve as well as the Institute for Energy Policy. Russia will suggest a network to link the leading universities of Russia, China, Brazil, India, South Africa, and will specialize in economic and technology. So they're all linking together right now, and they're setting up more and more things that have to do with the BRIC nations, separate and apart from the Western countries. Now, we got to think back here when maybe about 2-3 weeks ago, Bulgaria, their bank had a bank run, and what was very interesting about this is that the IMF, just maybe 2 weeks before the bank run, said that everything looked good for the Bulgaria bank. And it turned out that they were completely wrong because, again, these central bankers, whatever they're telling you, it's always the opposite. They never tell you what's really going on. And we can see that there was a run on two of the nation's largest banks, and several $100 million have been withdrawn in a matter of hours, and the Bulgarian Central Bank had to step in and take over both of them, or risk a collapse in the entire system. And of course, you have to remember these banks do not keep a lot of cash on hand. They only keep about 10%. The rest is loaned out, and a lot of it's created out of thin air, which is the fractional banking system that they use. And we can see right now the same thing's happening in pretty much all around the world. We know that these banks do not have the reserves on hand, and when things go south, we know what's going to happen. People are going to run to their bank and try to get their money out, just like in Cyprus. But it was too late because they closed the banks down and they implemented capital controls, and they started to steal their money on the back end. The same thing's going to happen here because, as we know, the United States, the UK, Australia, Switzerland, Canada have created bail-in documents. Now, the German government approved plans to force creditors into propping up struggling banks across Europe. It's times of crisis. Mainly owners and creditors will contribute to solving the crisis. And what they're saying right here is that creditors, which includes depositors, will help keep these banks afloat. And by doing what? By bailing them in. And we can see right now this has been blessed by Germany, and this will go into effect the beginning of 2015. So we can see right now everything is being set up for this main collapse that is coming. We know it's coming. We can feel it. We know it. We've been leading up to this October date. The Fed was out there letting us know that they're going to finish tapering then. I mean, yes, we will have a stock market crash, but you have to remember back in 2008, it will come down. They do have the kill switches. They will start printing like crazy. Then we'll move into 2015, and we'll have the major one hit at that point in time. And guess who's going to step in right there? Well, the central bankers will say we have to implement the bail-in documents, and guess what? Everything will be frozen across the board. No one will be able to get their money out, and then all of a sudden we're going to see event after event after event, and this will be blamed on another country. And of course these events will happen before the whole thing comes down because they needed to blame it on someone else. And you can see they are getting completely prepared for all this. This is definitely coming. Now, it looks like the people in Detroit, they are going to have their water turned off, and there's no money to keep it going. So right now there's protesters and activists blocking the trucks that were sent to shut off the water. Now, we have millions of dollars to spend on helping the illegals come over the border, setting them up, but we don't have any money to spend to keep the water on in Detroit to help the American people. Amazing to me. Now, with Obamacare, we understand in the reports going way back, and I've reported on this many times, but now there's a South Carolina staffing agency says that small businesses are hiring more part-time than full-time employees because of Obamacare. They're noticing a trend. The trend is we only want part-time. We need to keep them under a certain number of hours, and of course they have to keep it under 30 hours a week. And we can see right now as more and more of these places bring in part-time people, they do have to fit under that general unemployment rule, and if they get let go or anything like that, they're not counted, remember. And of course all these businesses are not hiring full-time. So this is a really big strain on the economy right now, and we can see a lot of these places are being hurt by Obamacare. Now, as we know, Obama is in Texas, and he really didn't want to meet with Rick Perry. He wanted to shake his hand on the tarmac, but not really have a sit-down. He doesn't even want to go to the border to see what is going on there. And of course he's giving excuses like, oh, you know, I don't want to go to the border because, you know, I don't want to make it a political theater. I don't want to make it a photo op. Well, we have to remember, he is the cause, his administration is the cause of what is going on down there. Plus, these children have scabies. They're riddled with lice and other diseases, and I personally think he doesn't want to see or touch or go near that area. And again, we can see that this has been planned. They're coming over the border, and the Beast, which is the train that brings them up from Central America across Mexico with the permission of the Mexican government, all this has been prepared and created to create this crisis to push his agenda forward. And right now, there are more military bases that are going to be asked to provide facilities for the illegal aliens. And the question is, why are they bringing them to military bases? Well, one reason they can say is that we don't want reporters in there, we don't want congressmen in there because of national security or some other specific reason, and it gives them more control of what is going on in this area. And you can see the congressman, again, is going to try to visit one of these places, trying to bring reporters to report on what's going on, but the Obama administration wants no one to see what is really going on in these areas. Now, it looks like Germany found another spy, a CIA chief, and they are expelling him from Germany. And this is not going very well with the relations between the U.S. and Germany, because we know Angela Merkel, she was being spied upon. Many of the other private Western Central Bank countries were being spied upon on the United States. And now we can see this is, going even further, and the relations between all these countries is not going well with the United States. And it seems like the United States central bankers are trying to make enemies all over the place with what they're doing. Now, yesterday we talked about how the Chinese president was out there saying that, the United States and China need to work together to stop a global disaster. And he specifically said a conflict between China and the United States will definitely be a disaster for the two countries and the world. Well, we can see that the United States central bankers really don't care about that whatsoever, because we know they're doing the pivot of Asia. They're setting up missile silos all around the area. They're moving Japan's base to a new location to place more sophisticated weapons. Everything's pointing towards China. Even the president said that they're doing this to contain China. Well, the U.S. is developing a new military tactic to deter China's slow but steady territorial advances in the South China Sea, including more aggressive use of surveillance aircraft and naval operations near contested areas. Our efforts to deter China have clearly not worked, said a senior U.S. official. The U.S. is doing precisely what China warned not to do, and what, according to the Chinese president, would lead to disaster for the two countries. Because the United States central bankers realize they need to push the war agenda. They have flashpoints in the Pacific, in Ukraine, the Middle East, and South and in Central Africa, because we understand that China is on one side, the U.S. is on the other, and we're already in a war. Actually, you really can consider this that the war has already started, because we have, just think about this for a second, we have the United States central bankers controlling the puppet regime in Ukraine, pretty much provoking Russia, trying to start that skirmish up there. We have the Central Africa, where the United States central bankers are in Sudan, they're in Mali, they're in other countries inside of Africa, and the other side is China. So we're technically in a world war once again. Just the big boom hasn't started, so people call it a world war. And we can see that this is really ramping up all over the place. Now, Ukraine right now is really pushing the agenda. They are going now into the southeastern region. 150 heavy vehicles of Ukraine Army are moving towards Lugansk at this time. These include APC, which is armored personnel carriers, tanks and self-propelled launchers, as well as 6 Grad rocket launchers. They are headed to this area. They're going to make an all-out assault in this area to try to provoke Russia in stepping in. This is what they want. They want to say Russia just invaded Ukraine. Once that happens, NATO, the United States are going to go, whoa, and all of a sudden we're going to see World War III kick into full action. And if they can't get that to happen, we are going to see an event here, because they are prepping for this quite hard. Now, Kiev is plans to complete military operations in eastern Ukraine within 1 month. So they are going to strike as hard as they possibly can with everything they have in this region. And they're going to try to complete this in 1 month. So this is going to be devastating for the people in this area, just like it's devastating for the Palestinians, where Israel is continually bombing not military areas, they are bombing civilian areas. Now, at this time, it seems like there is no progress on the Iranian nuke issue right now. Talks between Iran and the P5+1 pretty much seems no signs of progress, and the deadline is coming up in 10 days for something to happen. Once this date reaches, they can either get another 6-month extension, interim deal, or the whole thing is called off. So we're going to have to see what happens. They're bringing this right to the edge, and we'll have to see how this goes further. Now, Hagel is out there, and he is saying that the extremists from the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant ISIL, the Islamic State, pose a clear and imminent threat to the United States. And he's saying this on Wednesday to lawmakers who've been overwhelmed with the classified testimony from Hagel. And he says, make no mistake, and this country should not make any mistake on this, nor any in Congress. ISIL may not appear to be an imminent threat to the United States. It is a threat to the United States. It is a threat, a clear threat to our partners in that area, and it is imminent. And he is continually pushing this. They want to make sure that everyone realizes that they have weapons of mass destruction. They are a huge, huge threat. Now, it looks like the next target for these terrorists is Lebanon. And of course, they're going to try to engulf the entire Middle East. They want the United States government, central bankers, Israel, and the Arab nations. They want chaos in this entire region. They want it to look like the terrorists are moving across the entire Middle East and eventually pose and create a threat to Europe, the United States, Israel, and the other Arab nations. And they want these events to go live. They want everyone to be convinced that it was this group, and they're pushing this really, really hard. Right now, security agents have captured suspected terrorists at several locations, though only 7 of the 28 targeted ISIS members have been detained so far. The arrest came after a botch raid in Beirut hotel 3 weeks ago resulted in injuries to 3 policemen when a Saudi terrorist detonated a bomb. Just as agents burst through the door to his room, ISIS took responsibility for the incident, terming it a suicide attack. So it seems like they are making their way to Lebanon now. We know that the Yemen tribes are rising up in Yemen, and the whole thing is just all starting to fall apart. It is complete chaos in the Middle East at this time. Now, in Norway, it seems like Norway banks have been hit by a very large DDoS attack, and they're saying Anonymous is taking credit for this. Norway's top financial institutions have been hit in what appears to be a coordinated cyber attack, the biggest ever the country has experienced. Anonymous Norway is saying that they're responsible for this, and they're continually bombarding the site. It has brought down online banking system, and people are having a difficult time trying to access their money. And we can see that this is all being built up throughout the world to show that the banks can be brought down, and eventually what they're going to use is they're going to switch it to, Syrian, the Electronic Army, China, Russia, any one of these types of groups that will allow them to blame it on another country. This is exactly what they're going to do. Now, we understand that ISIS has seized about 88 pounds of uranium in northern Iraq. They stole this from the Mosul University, and The Iraq's UN ambassador warned these nuclear materials, despite the limited amounts mentioned, can be used in manufacturing weapons of mass destruction or in combination with other materials in its terrorist acts. Now, Russia is very concerned about this. Russia is extremely concerned by the stealing of nuclear materials by militants in Iraq. We are extremely concerned about the transition of this important facility into the hands of militants that not only leads to breakdown of deadlines for destruction of the Iraqi chemical weapons agreed upon with the OPCW, but it also represents a serious threat from the point of view of possible use of the seized materials by extremists, not only in Iraq, but also in neighboring countries, including Syria. And Russia is very concerned that they have this chemical weapon plant, which really has nothing in there, this uranium that they have captured. But of course, here in the United States, they're playing this up big time to make everyone believe that this terrorist group does have weapons of mass destruction. And what's very interesting is that the European governments prepare for military suppression of popular opposition. And what they're doing right now is the European General Affairs Council adopted provisions for Article 222, which is also called the Solidarity Clause. It said that European Union would mobilize all the instruments at its disposal, including the military resources made available by the member states. If a member state is affected by a terrorist attack or a natural or man-made disaster, the decision allows for the deployment of special forces, paramilitary groups, and various others anti-terror groups. A disaster is defined as any situation that has harmful repercussions on human beings, the environment, or wealth assets, according to accompanying paper by EU High Representative Catherine Ashton. Strikes, demonstrations, or uprisings endangering critical infrastructure, banks, and corporations can also be included among the targets of military actions carried out by the European police and military. So they're already preparing for something to go down, either from terrorists, from riots, from someone hitting banks or corporations. So you can see all of this is being played up, and we have to look around here and see what's going on. Now let's back up for 1 sec and take a look. So right now we have a terrorist group inside the Middle East right now, inside Iraq, making its move into Syria and going into Lebanon. They say they have chemical weapons. They say they have uranium. They say they have sarin gas, and they know how to create it. They say they're expert bomb makers in making stealth bombs. So we have increased security all around the United States, except for the borders. We also understand that the bail-in documents have been blessed by Germany throughout Europe, and we know the United States, Canada, Australia, Switzerland, they all have the bail-in documents. We understand there's kill switches for the stock exchange, the NASDAQ, and the BAT systems. We understand the corporations are trying to meld the cyber warfare to protect the accounts from being wiped out temporarily from a cyber attack. We understand the borders are wide open and terrorists are being let in, and they're all across the country in lone wolf packs, and they know how to make bombs. So we can see right now that this is being set up. We also understand the Department of Defense has set out explosives all around the world to many different embassies. And ISIS said if the United States attacks, they will car bomb all these embassies. I mean, we're seeing all this come together here. We also see the United States removed all the Syrian government officials inside the United States, closed their offices, brought in the Syrian opposition, and made them the acting government. We also realized they tried for many, many years to remove Assad, and that didn't work. And here we have the Islamic State all over the place, which are much, much deadlier than Al-Qaeda. So we can see how this is all ramping up right now. They are getting prepared. We also have the Fed now saying that they're going to complete their taper come this fall because the economy is just doing so well that we don't need to do this anymore. And we know for a fact that they're using Belgium Euroclear to purchase the bonds, and they're also using Japan to purchase the bonds, so it looks like they are tapering. So all of this is starting to look like we're heading towards this major collapse, because right now the manipulated numbers of the U.S. government central bankers and the real economy figures are starting to separate. They can't use the weather anymore to say, oh, this is why the economy is completely falling apart. They need to really wrap this up and say, you know what? Here's the event. The economy's collapsing because this other country. Some cities might be blacked out. Oh, I forgot about the Russian virus that is located on many of the power grid substations. That could be activated at any second, that can knock out the lights. We also have to remember about the dry run of the physical attack on the power grid system. So we can see all of this is really starting to fit together, and all the pieces are starting to come together, because we realize they can't keep this illusion going for much longer, and we're coming towards the end game. And this is why all of this is going crazy right now all around the world. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.